Welcome to another episode of Game Boy Roulette, where we take a look at randomly chosen games from the Game Boy library. Frogger, my god, the legend himself. Imagine you walk into an arcade in the early 1980s. There are a few games you are for sure going to see. Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Joust, Dig Dug, games like that are arcade staples. And standing among them, just as popular and arguably more iconic, is Konami's first big hit in the world of gaming, Frogger. The non-stop thrills of trying to get your frog across a busy highway in rushing rapids to get to the flies, it's one of those arcade games that was not only extremely fun at the time, but has aged incredibly well. Its simple controls, colorful graphics, and genuinely exciting gameplay is timeless, resulting in a game that's as fun to play now as it was 40 years ago. But while some of the other arcade hits went on to get great updates for the modern era, it never really went as well for Frogger. There were games that attempted to update the gameplay with larger levels and puzzles, and at least one try at turning Frogger into a full-on 3D platformer, but they didn't stick. No, Frogger got its gameplay right the first time, so the games that did the best were the ones that stuck with the original formula as closely as possible. So for this Game Boy Color release, the question becomes, is this an attempt to change what Frogger was to make him hip and cool for modern audiences? Or a nice nostalgic cozy game to whisk you back to the days where you all gathered around to watch someone enter ass into the high score table? Prepare to have your mind blown because the box features a frog. Be careful, little guy. I know that fly looks tasty, but the truck back there is... Wait, that is literally a tire right behind him. Oh dear, we don't want to see what happened a second later, do we? So, how does this arcade classic do on the small screen? Let's get hopping with Frogger. Oh right, Majesco had a hand in this one too. And Morningstar. Did they need this many people to work on? Oh god, haha, Frogger. Wow, that poor frog was about to be run over. Oh, and now he's got the sass. All right, let's Frogger. Yeah, it's Frogger, all right. So the goal of Frogger is pretty basic. If you've never seen it, you just have to get into these holes, and that's about it. I've explained all of Frogger. Wait, what's this? Oh, an invincible power-up. And also up in the top left is a, one of them. Was that supposed to be a fly? So they definitely did not mess with the formula. This was just straight up, oh god, Frogger, who just drowned. Ow, and got run over. Unfortunate, this is bad news for Frog. Once again, I do find myself a little disappointed with the lack of music, but I mean, they're trying to go for that arcade feel, and so having no music does kind of match that. Although that means I'm now missing the ambience of old arcades. What? Oh, right. Okay, weird, thing about Frogger, you have to be super precise with the jumps at the end. I always forget about that. You have to go right now. We did it! Watch out for sneaky gators in level 2. I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and say the emulator's messing up. Oh god. Oh god. We've frogged way too hard. The only thing that is working properly, if you saw that gator in the top right, if you hit that, then I think you lose a life. Look, we've seen the game. Let's just go ahead and switch over to the Game Boy Color version. Let's see the frog. Yeah! Hooray! Oh, even this screen is in color. I always like that. Let's see how it looks. It looks totally fine. Pretty basic coloring. Nothing that super stands out. But that's also not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're doing an arcade game like this. They have pretty much just gone with a total straight-up port with slightly updated graphics. That log wasn't going to help me at all. Oops. I always misjudge the jumps. Really cannot be overstated how popular Frogger was back in the day. Oops. Frogger was just Frogger had the same amount of popularity as Pac-Man. Heck, maybe even more. Okay, is the game gonna freak out again? Hey, we can actually play the game without having a seizure. I don't know if you guys saw that. There was definitely a sneaky gator just coming in. If we had waited another, yeah, look, there's the gator. So Frogger just sort of slowly adds complexity. And it's never that complex. I forget how many levels Frogger has before the whole thing resets. Try not to croak in level 3. Oh, I get it. Oh yeah, and then they add more gators. So the game doesn't really change up that much. So if you're looking for some kind of like... oh god. We're back to level 1? We are. So if you're looking for some kind of super updated, like, oh man, here's Frogger with levels and missions and whatnot, there's a version on the Game Boy Advance that does all that. And it's, from what I understand, is pretty good. I have not played it myself, but it has pretty decent reviews. But this one, they just pretty much straight up went for Frogger. And so your enjoyment of the game comes down to, do you like Frogger, yes or no? That's the thing about these arcade games. They either did nothing or they did everything. What I mean by that is they either changed everything, a total ground-up reimagining, or they just kept the gameplay the same but maybe updated the graphics. But of all the old arcade games, Frogger is... something about him is just appealing. It might just be the fact that he's a frog, and frogs are cool. At the same time, though, I'm already starting to get a little bored with this. And that's the risk of these arcade ports. Once you've played through once and you have the gameplay loop down, that's it. There's not much else the game's gonna do but throw occasional alligators at you. So I've said stuff like this before about games, but in this case it's very much true. The review is pretty much, it's Frogger. It's the same arcade classic we all know and love, just looking a little bit better. Oh... For some reason, I thought there'd be a much more interesting animation. And I don't know why I thought that. It is just Frogger, after all. Who would have thought that being on the Game Boy could be hazardous to a frog's health? Once again, we find ourselves looking at an arcade port. Not just that, but a port of one of the most popular arcade games ever. And as I said, arcade ports can go two ways. Straight up remakes, or complete retoolings of everything. In this case, they went more for the pure remake, and I think that for Frogger, it was the right way to go. Frogger is a game that experimented a surprising amount with its games, but at the end of the day, the original format just works. It's basic, it's easy, it's satisfying, and most importantly, it's fun. There's a good reason why Frogger is so beloved, because it's a great arcade game. But at the same time, we also run into the problem that many of these pure arcade games run into. Eventually, you just run out of stuff to do. Games like Frogger can be fun, but when you only have one screen with minor changes each round, I can see getting very bored very quickly. That's the risk with bringing old arcade games to the Game Boy. But then again, I don't think the Game Boy could have done one of Frogger's bigger adventure-style games without sacrificing the quality. So even with the drawbacks of a pure arcade experience, it was definitely the best way to bring Frogger to the handheld. Frogger truly is timeless. As I said, it's as fun to play now as it was 40 years ago, but admittedly, it may not have the power to keep you hooked and playing for very long. Give this one a try for a bit to experience the arcade classic, but I won't blame you if you get bored after just a few rounds. But hey, at least it's not a 3D platformer. God, that is so unsettling. And that's all for another episode of Game Boy Roulette. Make sure to like the video, comment, and subscribe to follow the series as we continue to dig through the Game Boy vault. I'm BrianJ, and I'll see you next time.